Did Sean Payton give Broncos country a little bit of a hint as to who he wants to be the leader in Denver's backfield in 2025? And after overachieving, can the likes of Patrick Surtain, Nik Bonitto, Zach Allen, and the rest of Vance Joseph's defense maintain the lofty expectations placed on them after such a good season in 2024? All things to come on today's rundown, and we will begin in the NFL, where the aforementioned Denver Broncos are well on their way into organized team activities, which began last week and will run into the summer as we get closer and closer to training camp 2025. And one of the bigger questions on the offensive side of the football remains not, can Bo Nix avoid a sophomore slump? Can he continue his development in year two under the tutelage of Sean Payton? That is feeling more and more like something of an expectation than a true question, given the way that Bo was able to drink through the fire hose in the first month of his NFL career and turn around the backstretch of that season as one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL and someone who was in legitimate contention for Rookie of the Year, despite being the sixth quarterback drafted in the first round. The question that I think is on a lot of people's minds is what's going to happen in the running back room. We saw the Broncos, who many expected to draft a runner in the first round, the likes of Omarion Hampton, or maybe even a Travion Henderson or Quinshon Judkins, somebody in that lower tier just below the likes of Ashton Genty, who had clearly separated himself as the Heisman runner-up and the cream of the crop of the 2024 running back class. They did not do that. They went defense in the first round, standing pat at their draft selection to select Zadeh Barron, the cornerback out of the University of Texas. And then in the second round, they trade back multiple times to inch their way back into the back end of that round before selecting UCF running back R.J. Harvey. He joins the backfield of Jaleel McLaughlin and Audric Estime after the departure of Javonte Williams. And to be honest, it's no secret that that room did not produce anywhere near the caliber that Sean Payton or the Broncos needed in order to maintain a balanced offensive attack. Sean Payton alluded to some of that when he said that it was too similar in terms of the way he was trying to rotate backs in and out, and the stylistic differences between each running back really hurt the Broncos' ability to have any kind of consistent offensive production. Javonte Williams excelled in the passing game as a pass blocker and a route runner. He was the team's second leading receiver in terms of receptions in 2024 behind Courtland Sutton, but he was completely ineffective as a runner and seemed to have lost so much of that burst and durability and big body tackle breaking ability that we saw from him in his early years with the Broncos pre-knee injury. Jaleel McLaughlin showed bursts of speed and explosiveness, but battled the fact that he is an undersized running back by NFL standards and was difficult to implement in a three-down type of basis. And Audric Estime, the 2024 fifth-round draft pick, struggled with ball security at the start of his NFL career to a degree where it was questionable whether or not he could be relied upon in significant game minutes and snaps. So the running back trio last year, and now the duo that remains after the departure of Javonte Williams, needs a figurehead. And there isn't a clear candidate as of this moment who can be that person to take on the lion's share of that load. R.J. Harvey, the second-round pick, is the clear front runner, in my opinion, to be that guy. But don't count out Audric Estime in his second year in the NFL as someone who, again, Sean Payton clearly singled out as a player that he liked. Sean Payton spoke about Audric Estime and what he wants to see from his second year back going forward. He said, quote, just running style, his physicality, the things that got him drafted, the things that we saw. I don't want to say the grade was incomplete, but they just didn't have enough. He's a back, he and Audric Estime is a back that requires enough touches, and he's going to get those opportunities. So while it's easy to paint R.J. Harvey as the front runner in the clubhouse to be the three-down focal point back for the Denver Broncos, whose running game needs life in the most significant of ways, Audric Estime, who is the biggest body and arguably the most durable physical runner remaining in the room, let's not count out him to be someone who's going to be heavily more involved in this Broncos rushing attack than he was in 2024. And I think that this bodes well for the Broncos and Sean Payton for this reason. Sean Payton looks for opportunities to deploy a platoon style at the running back position. 1-2 punches and 2-back systems have worked well for Sean Payton in the past. Now, trying to mix in 3 names like he did last year with Javonte Jaleel and Audric Estime is too much because stylistically they're too different. Running back is a rhythm position, and it prevented all 3 of those guys from really establishing any kind of rhythm in a game to be able to continue to grow and take chunk yardage as the game went on. And it forced so many substitutional changes on a drive-to-drive basis that the Broncos offense was just ineffective and out of sync in a lot of those moments. But a 2-back system, that's something we've seen with Sean Payton before, the likes of Mark Ingram and Chris Ivory and Reggie Bush and Darren Sproles. And his history with the Saints has shown that 2-backs with stylistic differences that can complement different facets of an offense work really well together. And the Broncos have, between those 3 guys, the opportunity to select 2 that fit that bill. Audric Estime is the one who stands out from the pack the most because he is bigger and more physical and more durable as a runner than those other 2, whereas Jaleel McLaughlin and RJ Harvey profile more similarly close together as smaller slider backs who have the speed and explosive capability that someone like an Audric Estime maybe lacks to a certain degree. So it feels like that stylistic dynamic combined with Sean Payton's renewed and consistent faith in Audric Estime, who despite the ball security issues and the fumbling issues that he had, to the degree where Estime was forced to walk around the facility with a football under his arm while his teammates were instructed to try to knock that ball away as a consistent reminder of the importance of ball security. Audric Estime was the back who was given the crucial in-game carries on the go-ahead game-winning drive against the Kansas City Chiefs that was ultimately nullified by a special teams error in Alex Forsyth's didn't die slowly enough field goal block. But it was Audric Estime who was given the ball and trusted in a gotta-have-it, need-this-to-win situation. So all of that snowballing forth into 2025, plus the stylistic difference that he shares compared to Jaleel McLaughlin and RJ Harvey, makes me think pretty strongly that we are going to see a lot more from Audric Estime in 2025 than we were able to see in 2024, despite the fact that they just drafted RJ Harvey in the second round, and he figures to carry a big role in this offense as well. So someone's going to have the odd man out in this offense as the season continues to progress. And as of now, it feels like Jaleel McLaughlin could be in the mix to be that guy who's fighting for a spot in this Sean Payton offense in year 2 with Bo Nix. Taking a look at the Denver Broncos from a broader perspective, we went into the 2024 season last year with the Denver Broncos nationally being looked at and considered as one of the worst rosters and teams in the NFL. In 2024, they were ranked 31st behind or ahead of only the New York Giants in terms of rosters who projected to produce top to bottom offense and defense ahead of the 2024 season. And that was ranked 31st by Pro Football Focus. This year in 2025 is telling a much different story as PFF released those same yearly rankings of the NFL rosters ahead of the 2025 season. And the Broncos come in at number 9, trailing the likes of the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles, the perennial AFC contender Baltimore Ravens, the NFC upstart Lions, who have kind of taken that conference by storm, the division mate Kansas City Chiefs, and the dynastic reign of Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and Travis Kelce, and the way that war machine continues to churn. The Buffalo Bills, the LA Rams, the Houston Texans, the Minnesota Vikings, all pretty perennial playoff teams in the last 2 to 4 years. The Broncos trail only them just ahead of the plucky upstart Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are kind of reinventing themselves under Baker Mayfield. And that number 9 ranking puts the Broncos ahead of teams like the Commanders, the Chargers, the Packers, the 49ers, the Cowboys, legitimate NFL rosters with legitimate NFL talent. So the overcorrection by Pro Football Focus to bring them from 31st to 9th is evidence of not just the recognition of the Broncos as a team and the players that they have, but an overcorrection in terms of the evaluation that was missed on young and unproven talent that the Broncos showed last season can contend for real. And it's no surprise that the spearhead, the engine driving this Broncos force in Pro Football Focus's estimation is not Bo Nix, who had a great season in his own right as a rookie. It's the Denver Broncos defense, an elite level defense that has anchored this team and did anchor this team, one, through the first month of the season when Bo Nix was severely under par in terms of expectation for what he was supposed to bring to this offense, but then continuing along Bo Nix's ascension throughout the back stretch or the middle stretch of the season to be one of the better teams in the NFL. When speaking about the Denver Broncos defense and the strength that it anchored them in 2024, Pro Football Focus said this: Denver's defense was one of the best in the NFL this past season. Only the Philadelphia Eagles allowed a lower EPA per play figure and fewer yards per play than the Broncos in 2024. Again, that is the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles, who vaunted one of the best defenses in recent years. They also ranked second in the league with a 39.9% pressure rate. And Patrick Surtain II became the first cornerback to win DPOY, Defensive Player of the Year, since Stephon Gilmore in 2019. After drafting quarterback Zadeh Barron in the first round of this year's draft, the Broncos are on the short list for having the best defense in football. Let's not forget that Pro Football Focus mentions a 39.9% pressure rate. This is a Broncos defense led by Nik Bonitto, Zach Allen, and the rest of that vaunted front that led the NFL in sacks last season. So leading in pressure rate, leading in sacks, drafting the likes of Zadeh Barron to help bolster a secondary that, when injuries to Riley Moss and a little bit to Patrick Surtain limited them from a depth standpoint, we saw some cracks in that armor. Zadeh Barron figures to slot in alongside Riley Moss, PS2, Jaquan McMillan, Chris Abrams-Drain, and the like, as another key piece that the Broncos can move around in that secondary to maintain the elite level play that they saw last season. And that's not even beginning to broach, which Pro Football Focus doesn't even mention in that moment, the free agent signings of Dre Greenlaw at the inside linebacker position and Talanoa Hufanga to go alongside Alex Singleton and Brandon Jones, two sturdy players in their own right. So assuming health is on the Denver Broncos side, and we know how much Sean Payton talks up Bo Lowry and his training staff and their ability to keep the Broncos as one of the healthier teams in the NFL, when for years they were consistently one of the most oft injured and least healthy teams in the NFL, especially at critical positions. That is seemingly something that's in play for Denver. And if those cards fall that way, the Denver Broncos defense, who was ranked top in the league when it comes to sack and pressure rate and top 3 in points allowed and scoring defense, stacked up against the likes of the Super Bowl champions, that is going to continue to be a strength and may even eclipse the level of strength that we saw from them in 2024, which, given the lofty expectations that are now placed on them, not just locally, but nationally by the likes of Pro Football Focus, ESPN, and others, is no small task or feat for Vance Joseph and his crew. Conversely, Pro Football Focus, in their evaluation of the roster, when asked to list a greatest strength, they were also asked to list the biggest potential weakness. And that weakness felt familiar based on last season's observations and could be slightly concerning given what they chose not to invest in this offseason in the draft and free agency, and that is the Broncos' offense. When asked about the offense, Pro Football Focus wrote, quote, "While the Broncos gave quarterback Bo Nix the highest graded pass blocking unit in football and an offensive line that earned an 83.5 grade, they didn't provide ample skill position weapons. The Broncos earned the 5th worst PFF receiving grade and the 5th worst PFF rushing grade in 2024. Denver is hoping the likes of Evan Ingram and RJ Harvey will fix that issue." And that's the truth, because the Broncos had the opportunity to take a higher graded player, at least higher graded in terms of the national observation. Their grades will always differ from those of others, but they had opportunities to invest more on the offensive side of the football, first in free agency and in the draft. They ended up on the back end of free agency after the first initial wave or two, signing Evan Ingram to a 2-year deal to be that joker. The 30-year-old tight end will have joined his 3rd team in his NFL career, where he saw productive stops at each place in the Giants, who drafted him, and the Jaguars, who picked him up in free agency. But that comes with an inherent risk, as does most free agent signings, of the two teams that knew Evan Ingram the best, the one that drafted him and the one that gave him his second act, both of which are starved for playmakers on the offensive side of the football, turned their nose at Evan Ingram and said, no, thank you. So while there is a lot of upside and potential for Sean Payton, who seems to know exactly how he wants to use Evan Ingram and the role as the joker that he wants him to play from the tight end position, there is an inherent amount of risk that cannot be overlooked. And if Evan Ingram lives up to those expectations, the lack of growth and the stunted potential on offense, even with a better defense, could prevent this Broncos team from taking the next step. The same with the likes of RJ Harvey. If he is unable to do something that's fairly unrealistic, in my opinion, to be able to just completely step in as a late 2nd round pick and bring life and breathe energy and vitality into a Broncos running back room that, while you can say was ranked 16th in the NFL in terms of rushing production last year, even though that's a fugazi statistic given how much Bo Nix's legs, both on design runs and unplanned scrambles, contributed to the yardage output and production in that rushing offense. For RJ Harvey to step into that and try to inject life in it as someone who's a little bit slight and undersized himself and will be platooning carries with the likes of Audric Estime and likely Jaleel McLaughlin, Blake Watson, and Tyler Bidet in spells as well, for him to be able to revitalize that is a big ask. And if he isn't able to, and if the Broncos offense looks similarly discombobulated or out of sync or ineffective in the run game, the pressure that that's going to put on Bo Nix, even in a year or two, where he's able to learn more and settle in more as a quarterback in Sean Payton's system, that extra added pressure could also prevent the Broncos from stunting that development and growth after a 10-7 season where they not only broke their streak of losing seasons, but made the postseason for the first time since 2015 when they won the Super Bowl in the 2015-2016 postseason. So the strength that is the Broncos defense and the way that they were able to not just reload and bring guys back, but to add in free agency and in the earliest round of the NFL draft at positions of need, both depth and starting caliber players, is a significant boon to this team as the wind heads into their sails in 2025. And if health remains on their side, as it did for good stretches of last season, I do believe that they will not only meet, but could exceed the lofty expectations that have now caught up to them after catching a lot of people, evaluators, and teams by surprise in 2024. Conversely, the gamble that they're taking on offense, that Evan Ingram, as the 30-year-old tight end who will be on his 3rd team, will provide that spark in the joker role offensively and add a new element or layer dynamically to this offense. and that the likes of Marvin Mims, Devon Vele, Troy Franklin, etc., will continue to take notable and sizable steps of growth in this offense to surround Bo Nix with something better than the fifth worst trio or supporting cast of pass catchers in the NFL is a big one. And if it doesn't pay off, you may see it eat into, in a negative way, the growth and development on the defensive side of the ball that they're experiencing. It's something that I and many of you, I'm sure, will be monitoring as the offseason rolls on. We are just weeks away from another OTA period for the Denver Broncos, and then you'll turn the page before you know it. It'll be mid-July after our 4th of July holiday, and we will be full steam ahead for Broncos training camp 2025 and really see whether or not this Broncos team in year one with the marriage of Sean Payton and Bo Nix were pretenders or building into genuine AFC contenders once again. Can't wait to break it all down with you this week. It has been a pleasure to chat with you again today. And on the way out, I want to make sure I give a quick shout out to any and all of you out there who found themselves on a Saturday and Sunday this past weekend down at Fort Carson Military Base in Colorado Springs for the annual Spartan Trifecta weekend. I was there. I have competed now in those races for the last 2 years, and it is such a cool experience to see and meet the community of people that are down there. It is physically the hardest and most challenging thing I have ever done in my life. I am sitting crisscross applesauce underneath this lower third right here because my legs and lower body are so sore that I'm going to have to limp out of here at a much slower rate than I normally would. And I just wanted to make sure that I gave a moment of recognition for the work that they do down there, for Fort Carson, for being such a gracious host and for putting on such an amazing event year in and year out, something that I feel so cool to be a part of. So I plan on being there next year. If you haven't already, Google it, look it up, and hopefully I'll see you again next June. In the meantime, I will catch you tomorrow at noon at the same time on the same place with whatever else the Denver sports scene has for us then.
I do what I love what I do. Second nature to put in the work.